Burnley 73 is the latest in a line of analog-inspired plugins from boutique plugin developer Sonimus. As the name implies, it's inspired by the classic and much-copied Neve 1073 design, and aims to recreate the characteristic sound, not only of its EQ, but also its two input options, mic and line. In this video, we'll explore exactly what Burnley 73's controls do, analyse its response, and then use it in a full mix session along with other Sonimus plugins. To take us from an unmixed track like this, to a finished mix like this. You can get demos of all these plugins at www.sonimus.com, and we'll be reviewing Burnley 73 in issue 226 of Computer Music magazine. Burnley 73 follows quite closely the various elements of the 1073 hardware design, and although the layout is particular to the plugin, aspects such as the inverted dual concentric gain and frequency knobs have been retained. This adds to the authenticity, but if you're unfamiliar with the Neve design, it does take a little getting used to. The thing to remember is that even though the gain is 0 at 6 o'clock, boost and cut are still achieved with clockwise and counterclockwise moves respectively. So, let's take a look at the controls in more detail. Moving from left to right, first we have the high pass filter. This is notched at 300, 160, 80 and 50 Hz with a final off position and is 18 dB per octave. Next up, the 3-band EQ. This includes a low shelf band with 4 notched frequency options, 35, 60, 110 and 220 Hz. A mid bell-shaped band with 6 notched frequencies, 360 and 700 Hz, and 1.6, 3.2, 4.8 and 7.2 kHz. And a high shelf fixed at 12 kHz. The gain control on all bands is smooth and delivers boost or cut up to 16 dB. The next control is the input control. Rather than a typical gain control, as you'd find on a 1073 hardware unit, this is actually a gain compensated saturation control. Turning it clockwise for the mic circuit and counterclockwise for the line circuit. Finally, there is a straightforward post-processing output control, plus 16 dB to minus 24 dB. Burnley 73 also has a few efficiency features you won't find on the hardware, in the form of show labels, EQ in, and individual band bypass. The first option simply allows you to switch off the pop-up parameter feedback. The other two allow you to bypass the EQ as a whole, while retaining the preamp saturation, and also by clicking on their respective labels, switch in and out individual bands. You can also click in the frequency points around the knobs rather than turn the knobs. Some emulations of classic gear omit such subtle enhancements, so it's good to see them here. Analog emulations should recreate the non-linearities and distortions of the hardware they're based on. Here, using a test tone, we ascertain that the line saturation introduces very moderate second harmonic distortion for frequencies up to about 150 Hz. But beyond this frequency, the distortion becomes insignificant. So in practice, turning up the saturation very gently thickens the low frequencies while leaving the mid and upper frequencies untouched. Meanwhile, for mic saturation, the second harmonic is stronger, and moving beyond about 500 Hz, it's joined by an increasingly significant third harmonic. This type of saturation is more obvious, fattening the lows and low mids, but also adding presence to the mid-range and beyond. As far as the EQ is concerned, we can use white noise and a spectrum analyzer to get a better idea of the curve shapes. Burnley's shelves both have very gentle slopes, and by way of example, at maximum gain, the high shelf boosts 3 kHz by 9 dB. Both shelves also have a dip just before the boost. Meanwhile, the bell filter has proportional Q, so it becomes sharper as gain increases. Nevertheless, in both cases, these specifics are quite subtle. In addition to Burnley 73, Sonimus produced 4 further analog influence plugins. In total, there are 2 analog desk emulations, Blitzen and Satson, and 3 EQs, SoniQ Pro, Sweet Tone, and Burnley 73. Here we have a track incorporating acoustic drums, electric bass, piano, electric guitars, synths, and some effects. Let's see what we can achieve using just the Sonimus plugins. First, for the desk emulations, we'll use the more vintage sounding Blitzen channel emulation for each drum track. With these loaded up, to achieve consistent sonic character across them, we need to use their individual faders to set levels to meter around 0 VU. With this done, we can then rebalance the kit using the DAW faders. For both electric and synth bass, we'll use the more edgy Satson emulation. Once again, setting the gain controls to achieve 0 VU and adjusting mix balance with the DAW faders. finally, one more Britson channel emulation for the acoustic guitar. Now for the bus plugins. We'll subgroup the drums and use the Britson bus plugin across the submix. Once again, we're aiming to meter at 0 VU, and with no gain on the plugin, we can either adjust all the kit faders or simply insert a gain plugin prior to the bus plugin. On our overall output, we're going for the more upfront Satson bus plugin. Here we'll definitely use a gain plugin to adjust the metered level towards 0 VU. And we'll probably need to adjust this as the mix progresses. For drum kit EQing, we'll use the Burnley 73 on the snare, the more flexible Son EQ Pro on the kick, and the Sweet Tone on the overheads. Looking at the snare in more detail, we're boosting the low shelf 6 dB at 220 Hz for fatness, then for crispness, a few dB boost at either 7.2 kHz or 4.8 kHz works well. For the kick, sweeping and boosting the low mids highlights the boxiness around 400 Hz, which we can cut a few dB. Meanwhile, using the bell-shaped low band, we can add weight between 80 and 100 Hz. Then use the high-pass filter to keep the sub-frequencies in check. Let's bypass the EQ to compare. Now turning to the drum kit overhead mics, here we can use Sweet Tone as a tilt EQ in Tilex mode, using the sweet setting, which is centered around 2 kHz, to shift the overall kit sound brighter and thinner or darker and fatter. Here's a quick A/B. Turning to the electric bass, the sound is quite clean. Loading up the Burnley 73, we can wind up the mic saturation to add edge. Here right up to 40. And then boost the low shelf at 110 Hz to add weight, here a boost of 4 decibels. Here's it without. and here's it with. Finally, we can also help the distorted electric guitar cut through. With SoniQ Pro, the drive provides additional harmonic distortions. Here we've set it to 6. And we can also use the narrower mid-Q setting on the high-mid EQ band to boost quite aggressively, here 6 dB, at around 5 kHz. A quick bypass to compare before and after. Let's now hear the overall mix at 3 significant mix stages. Firstly, with no plugins. Next, with all the desk emulations set up. And finally, with the desk emulations and the EQs all included. The Sonimus plugins offer various types of EQ and saturation to help you achieve that elusive analog flavour in the box. They're affordable, very easy to use, with very low CPU hit, and the desk emulations in particular can be loaded up and forgotten about. Each EQ is subtly rather than strikingly different, with Burnley 73 offering the most control over additional saturation, and SoniQ Pro offering the most flexible EQing. For more info on Sonimus plugins, or to get demo versions, visit www.sonimus.com and make sure you check out our review of Burnley 73 in Computer Music Magazine issue 226.